Not just the Mercy Watchers, but everybody. Hello, everybody. It's such a great day today because we're visiting with Dr. Kevin Stuart. And we're just going to get into it and find out all about his leadership here at the Center for Faith and Culture at the University of St. Thomas. So, Kevin, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be
Great
here.
to see you. First off, tell us about you. Where are you from? What's going on?
So I'm originally from Mississippi, a small town in East Central Mississippi. Grew up there.
Sounds like a John Grisham novel.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Then went to college in Louisiana, and then graduate school overseas, and finished up with a PhD
Now,
here in
you can't
Texas.
just do all this overseas business. You got to tell us where you went.
So my undergraduate's from Louisiana State University, LSU. And then master's from the London School of Economics and PhD from the University of Texas at Austin.
Wow, that's tall cotton right there.
That's right.
But all of those things, and what does all that education prepare you to do?
Well, it depends on whom you ask.
Okay.
But what it prepared me for really was to think critically and hopefully in this time, as we need it to, positively about politics. That's what my education is mostly in. I've always been a bit of a political junkie. My father describes when I was 3 years old, they plopped me down in front of one of the two major party political conventions in the summer, and I was transfixed even at 3 years old.
Wow.
So I guess, you know, in a sense, you think you choose your career, but in another sense, perhaps there's more going on than you're aware.
I can remember as a kid being away at basketball camp, and I was the geek that hid the radio so I could listen to the political conventions, which was unheard of, at least in my peer set. Anyway, well, that's great. You are now here heading the Nesti Center for Faith and Culture. Tell us why you'd want to do something like that.
Well, the Nesti Center next year will celebrate its 30th anniversary, so it's got quite deep roots, and I think it's already got a strong track record and poised and prepared to do a tremendous amount of new and great things for the university, for Houston and Texas, and also for the church.
Right. So tell me a little bit about that for some of the viewers who might not know the Nesti Center for Faith and Culture. What is it? What is its purpose? What is its mission? What do we expect it to do?
Yeah, so I think core to the mission of the Nesti Center, because you think about faith on the one hand, culture on another. These are two very large things, and now we're going to put them together, right, to make something even bigger. So what in the world could that possibly be? And I think we're thinking about it in a very particular way that I think will lead to a lot of good fruit. And that particular way is that we live in a time of tremendous institutional decline. So institutions all across our society, the very fabric of society itself, is in trouble. And the Nesti Center exists to help form people so that they can go out and build and strengthen institutions within society. Now, institutions might mean the church. That's perhaps at a Catholic university the most natural thing to come to mind. But it also might mean serving in their community, so neighborhood and town organizations. It might mean the institution of marriage. It might mean the institution of the family, so being parents. And so we're trying to form people to better equip them in this time of institutional decline, where the fabric of our society is literally weakening before our eyes, to strengthen it. Because we are people of hope. So we don't give in. We don't
not just
give
giving up in the face of all that.
No, we go out and do something about it.
I see. All right, great. So that's the sort of the mission of the Nesti Center for Faith and Culture. Now, one of the things that we like to do on this podcast is talk about the innovations that are present here at the University of St. Thomas, but also how those innovations tie into the great riches of our tradition. So can you talk to us about what the horizon looks like for the Nesti Center relative to innovation, understanding its particular mission, and the great tradition within the Catholic faith?
Yeah, so I think in addressing any number of social ills, the Academy, colleges and universities have a lot to contribute. Mm-hmm. And the way that we're particularly going to manifest that contribution, the way we're going to instantiate that, is to be this connector between the ivory tower and the public square. And so what that's going to look like in the sense of innovation is creating projects and programs that take the great scholarship that people are doing here at this campus and elsewhere, mm-hmm. especially regarding these social institutions, and turn it into something actionable by working with people and with organizations to do that. So an example for that is we have in the works a project on the future of faith in America. Mm-hmm. And so what trends do we see? What can social science tell us about where the church is and where it's headed? And then what can we do to harness the power of the good things the good trends, mm-hmm. while also diminishing and mitigating against the not so good trends?
I see. So when you said that, my mind instantly flew to the question of looking at the future of faith kind of as a social science perspective. What about the notion of faith within that future? Right, so it may not be a completely predictable trajectory based on political currents or however you want to frame that. But in terms of faith, and I think back to the 1970s, right, where Paul VI, his pontificate came to an end with his death, and then of course there was the election of John Paul I, and so we were all ready for that pontificate because that would be a transition. And then 30 days later, we had a new transition, right? So the Holy Spirit, there are elements with that are sort of almost unpredictable in that way. So how do we figure the Holy Spirit's action, if you will, within that context of trying to understand the broader societal trends?
Yeah, that's a great question, a great point, that the future is not determined. We're not deterministic about it. We have choices to make. Mm-hmm. And our goal is, in part, to help us make better informed choices, to kind of see things accurately around us, to help us make better choices, to make the most of that future. Mm-hmm. And also to do so in a way, or that perhaps is a form of listening to the Holy Spirit, to pray, to be receptive, to see reality the way it really is, not the way that we wish it were, because mm-hmm. that is, whether you're 6 years old like my oldest son or 46 years old as I am, the temptation is immense to see the world as you think it ought to be rather than the way it is. Mm-hmm. But in order to make things more like you think they ought to be, you have to first see things the way they are, understand what you're dealing with, what the raw materials are, so to speak,
right,
and then go from there to something better.
Ah, all right. So you mentioned just a minute ago something about research that is done in the academy, certainly here at the University of St. Thomas, but outside University of St. Thomas. So talk to me about those kinds of partnerships you see developing or might already exist relative to that.
Yes, so there are great scholars out there across the land who often don't get the microphone they deserve, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And we'd like to amplify some of them. So we're looking at hosting an event on marriage with two of the leading scholars in the entire country on the institution of marriage, Brad Wilcox from the University of Virginia and Mark Regnerus from the University of Texas at Austin. Mm-hmm. And they will tell us about kind of where things are, where the trend lines look to be taking us, what practically out there is working, mm-hmm. What practically has been tried and doesn't work, so that we all get a sense of how to strengthen this most vital institution.
So marriage as a vital institution. Talk to us about what do we see that kind of helps us understand that reality about the importance of marriage within the context of society?
Yeah, so let's take the church, for example. there's been some good data that shows, I'll just give you just one data point. I won't sort of throw tons and tons of stats, so we can get into that.
Yeah.
But just one data point. Everyone is, or many people these days are pretty familiar with the half century or so slide in church attendance and participation across the board. What they may not realize is that if we control for just one variable, that slide disappears in the data. Meaning that if we control for just one variable, you are just as likely to be a frequent church attender today as people were at the high point of American religiosity in the 1950s, post-World War II era. And that one variable is, were your parents married throughout your childhood? If your parents were married throughout your childhood, then you are just as likely to be a regular church attender today as people were 70 years ago. That tells us how closely tied these two institutions are to one another, and I think should grab the attention of priests in their parishes about what ministries they should put maybe some additional emphasis on, bishops about their dioceses, again, what ministries they should be emphasizing.
So tell us, marriage, there's a correlation, if not causation, but it sounds like there may be causation too, between church attendance, religiosity, and marriages flourishing. But why do we want marriages to flourish? Is there a reason for that? I mean, because you hear a lot in the secular world today about, I've got this partner and that thing's going on, but we don't really need marriage. So talk to me about that. What's the value in that to society?
Marriage is almost magical in its
magical
social
marriage.
property. Magical marriage. That's right. It's
Right.
almost magical in its good properties. That is to say that when you look at everything from wealth to psychological well-being, physical health, drug use and addiction, arrests, just about any factor you want to look at, it all gets better with marriage. All the good things get better, the worst things decline, even to the point that we see not only faster recovery from things like cancer, but more frequent recovery from things like cancer. Perhaps one of the best studies—
That does sound like magic,
It
right?
is. Perhaps one of the best studies of this is out of Harvard University that followed JFK's entering class as it happened, and what happened to them and their children and now their grandchildren over the course of more than 80 years. And what they discovered in that immense longitudinal project is that close relationships, tight relationships, with marriage as the most fundamental of those, are the most profound factor predicting health and long life. More so than your cholesterol level, more so than your blood pressure.
Yes.
The strength of your relationships, particularly the strength of your marriage, predicts long, happy, healthy life.
So recently I went in for one of these physicals, right? The blood pressure, the cholesterol. So you're telling me they should have also taken a reading on my marriage.
It wouldn't be a bad idea, right? For your doctor to say, how's your marriage?
That is incredible. And it's a true insight, I think, into the connected nature of the human family, right? Because we do measure all of those other biology metrics, right? Biological metrics, but we don't take stock in sort of the societal human connections.
That's right. So in a way, it's surprising, and I deliver the stats in a way to try to blow your hair back a bit. But on the other hand, as you point out, we are whole creatures, mind, body, spirit. So in that sense, it's utterly unsurprising that the quality of our relationships, our friendships, our marriage, our relationship to our Maker, that these would have profound physical implications for us as well.
Wow, that's incredible. So it sounds to me like the work of the Nesti Center for Faith and Culture right here at the University of St. Thomas is going to have high impact on the human family. So I heard recently that we have one of our largest cohorts starting the Masters of Arts in Faith and Culture program. Is that correct?
That is correct. Our largest class ever entered this fall.
Wow. And so when those people progress through that program of study, what is it that they will be able to do that maybe they don't come tooled with before the program?
Sure. So we equip them to work in their communities, in their churches, in their work. Across ecumenical lines in many cases, guiding groups and teams to success, right? So the immersion in faith and culture looks at our faith and the way to proceed from a thoroughly Catholic understanding, a deep understanding of the Catholic riches, intellectual riches, to be solid American citizens, to be strengthening our country. Mm-hmm. And again, I think in a way, and maybe in the most profound way, Father Nesti and the others who founded the center were prescient, because the country's fabric was stronger 30 years ago than it is now. And so this kind of program that equips people to go out there and lead productive change is more necessary now than perhaps ever before.
So the Center for Faith and Culture, I know that you have many initiatives. Could you just outline a couple of those for us that you're most interested to share with people today?
Sure. So I've already briefly mentioned the Future of Faith project. I'm pretty excited about that one that's coming. We'll also have a new certificate in sexuality and gender coming online. So this is one of those topics where people fear to tread, that we have to be fearless about, that we have to be fearless in the search for truth, that we have to be compassionate in the tone and rhetoric and understanding, but also proceeding to the truth, because that is ultimately, what is compassionate is and what is true. That's the intersection to reach.
Excellent. Well, it's been a delight to visit with you today and learn more about your vision for the Nesti Center for Faith and Culture. And so I want to thank all of you for viewing this podcast today, and thank you all very much, and God bless you.